Welcome to the Saturday Simulcast, brought to you by the Union Club Hotel. And the band is back together again to some extent. Mike Carmin joins Tom Dienhart and myself. I'm Alan Karpick, and we're glad to have you with us. A lot to talk about this week. We'll do this segment with Mike and Tom, and Brian will fill us in on that nail-biting men's basketball trip to Austria. That was, I know he's trying to put the wraps on that and at least make some sense of it. So we'll hit that as well. But so this segment, we'll talk some football. Mike Carmin has covered football since Chicago was in the Big Ten. Maybe not quite. You're younger than I am. You're younger than I am. I need to stop with any of that kind of stuff. That's silly. We'll talk about what we might see and the wonderful world of Purdue football. And then also Mike Carmin wrote a good story today on our site on Gene Keady and his opportunity for, that was yesterday actually, because this is airing Saturday. So we have to keep our dates straight, but to talk about Gene Keady and his trip to immortality to some extent in basketball. Of course, he'll be inducted into the Hall of Fame later today. That would be Saturday in Springfield, Massachusetts. So, Tom, I'm going to start with you. It's been kind of, you're amazing when I read your stories that you can figure out who the players are in the limited amount of time and who's lining up with whom. You're not getting a lot of access, which we understand, or at least that's the way the world is these days. But just some overall impressions of the last week. Obviously, Ryan Walters made an announcement about a big injury, which is certainly a key injury, I should say, maybe a couple of them actually. But what else are you putting together here this week as we inch 1 week closer to the start of this football season?
Yeah, Mike remembers this time last year we were watching all the practice and they lost in like 2 days. And Garrett Miller and DeMarge Lewis, I think, went down on consecutive days. The news isn't as bad this year. The Florida Atlantic transfer receiver Jamal Adrien is out for the year with an ACL injury he suffered in camp. Pretty big loss. He's a guy who I think they were going to count on, obviously, a big receiver. And then they had their current number one center, Josh Kaltenberger, got rolled up on, injured a knee, not as serious as the wide receivers, but probably could miss a couple games. So Purdue's already down to its third string center because, of course, Gus Hartwig is still coming back from his knee injury. So, you could talk about injuries from now until the sun comes up for football teams. But you always got to at least focus on the key ones. And that's sort of the key goings-ons from an injury standpoint. Garrett Miller is still coming along, of course, the tight end. They're not really pushing him, but he should be ready to go, of course, as well. And DeMarge Lewis, too. They're sort of taking baby steps with him. But both those guys have had 12 months now to get better. And they should be ready to go come the season. So, just a lot of energy, a young staff, quick-paced practices from a little bit we do get to see. And the great unknown, guys. Like you said, Al, we only see 5 to 7 periods of practice a day, and it's only the stretching and the individual drills. It's not like we're watching them go through 11 on 11s or anything. So I can't give you any great insight as to how everybody's looking. We're all going to have to really wait till see September 2nd, Ross-Ade Stadium here. So it's a very interesting time, an exciting time. A new era, and we'll see if all these new faces can be blended together by this new staff.
Yeah, Mike, you've been covering it for a long time and watching it. It almost says by definition that this is the most uncertainty you've had, just because you've got basically half a new team or whatever. That Tom's got the numbers, but is there anything comparable to any of this? I mean, even what's going on in the world of college football, the realignment, all this, it all kind of ties into this world of uncertainty. But yet, one thing that we think is pretty certain is that, we're pretty certain that the Ross-Ade Stadium will be ready and Purdue will be playing Fresno State at noon on September 2nd. But have you ever in your professional career seen anything quite like this in terms of just the balls being up in the air, really not knowing what the heck we're going to see?
And by September 2nd, Fresno State might be in the Big Ten.
So
that's
is that a scoop?
Yeah. That's not a scoop.
Okay.
The bad guess. I would compare this a little bit. It's not at the same scale, but and Tom remembers this when Bob Diaco took over as defensive coordinator at Purdue. There was so much unknown about what they were going to do defensively because they kept everything under wraps. They didn't allow us to watch much of anything. They barely did anything in front of us. So we didn't really have an idea, what that defense was going to look like. And then come to find out there wasn't much mystery to it because it wasn't that good.
Yeah.
But
was that 2019? What year was that?
Yeah. But then,
2020, the COVID year.
Yeah. Okay.
And then all the dysfunction that happened behind the scenes with the hiring of Diaco and his presence, and he brought a lot of baggage with him to Purdue. The other thing that kind of strikes me about this whole thing, you talked about, we know about Josh Kaltenberger because he played last year and he filled in for Gus the last part of the season and did a fine job.
Yeah.
But a lot of these other guys, we just don't know about.
Yeah.
And we don't, from my perspective, other than maybe Hudson Card and a couple of other guys, we don't know who's important and who's not from the newcomer standpoint. Like, they could suffer some injuries, but we don't know how big of a deal that is because we really don't know where these guys fit into this year's team. Now, after the first game, you get a better idea who's who and who's going to play what. But no, I think the receiver was someone they were counting on to step in and fill some voids there because they just don't have a lot of proven guys at the receiver position. But otherwise, just so many new names and so many new faces to digest that you don't know. You're in a complete wait and see mode until Fresno State to see how these guys perform.
Yeah, it is truly a game, and then you have a 37-year-old coach with a new staff. Just speaking to experience, Tom, it doesn't mean that they can't do it, but that just brings that added challenge of herding these cats, so to speak. I keep using that term, but it's probably not quite fair. But just trying to line everybody up, get everybody on the same page, and yet you're a whole new group yourself. I mean, that to me presents a large challenge, at least from an administrative and coaching standpoint. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, just a lot of new and moving parts, Alan. You're right, between the staff and the players. 19 transfers.
Yeah.
I believe is the number I counted up again today. The offensive line and the secondary imported the most players from the portal. To give you an idea of the areas of emphasis for this staff when it came to portal additions. Did get one good look at what, at least on, I think it was Tuesday, the number one offensive line. The left tackle, I feel safe to say it's going to be Musa, and the right tackle is going to be Bo. And the two guards were both portal guys. The left guard was Preston Nichols from UNLV, and the right guard was Jalen Grant from Bowling Green. I do think they like both those guys. And the guy snapping was the kid from Colorado, Austin Johnson. So that was just your one quick snapshot for that day. But I think those four guys are going to be pretty solid. I would think once we get to September. Well, like Mike said, we'll have to wait and see. But there's still a lot to like about this offense, I think. I know, again, the line's got to come together. I understand that. But I think Hudson Card's going to have some skill to work with the tight end. I like that tight end room a lot. Miller, Paferi, Bibber. They love Max Clare, the young redshirt freshman. I think there's enough receivers to make this thing go. There's not a Charlie Jones, at least it doesn't appear to be. And then the running back room, guys, see if Mike agrees with this. Probably the best group of running backs they've had since 2017 when they had Markel Jones, Richie Worship, and DJ Knox, and Tario Fuller. This group's got three, I think, pretty solid backs with Maccabee, Dylan Downing, and then, of course, Tyrone Tracy now. So, I think they've got some weapons that, again, the key is going to be up front. Can that line develop?
Yeah. Do you agree with that assessment, Mr. Carmin?
Well, we've seen those guys. So I have an idea. I have an idea what they can do. And I thought last year, and we don't know the exact reasons, I thought Tyrone Tracy was underused last season. I mean, he came out of the gate strong, made some plays early, right. but then seemed to fall out of favor throughout the season. And when we watched him in spring after he had transferred from Iowa, I mean, here was a guy that could do a lot of different things for the offense. He could line him up at running back, line him up at receiver. He was, I thought, one of the top playmakers going into the last season. But maybe he didn't have a good handle on the offense. Who do you make mad on the coaching staff? I mean, there's just a lot of different things you don't.
Anything's possible.
Well, yeah, with that group, anything was possible. And so, I hope he gets an opportunity to showcase his skills because he's one of the proven guys on this team that people know about. And over time, other guys will prove themselves. But he's, to me, he's a guy that you have to, he should be a big part of your game plan week one. And that should be somebody Fresno State really focuses on too, because of his versatility to line up at different positions and do things in the running game and the passing game.
Yeah, and it's going to be an important thing that Purdue's going to have to, as much as Ryan Walters wants to have a defense, it's going to be difficult to deal with. You're going to have to score some points and be interesting. That's what's going to be a fun thing to watch. All right, September. This may be one of the all-time Septembers, and for a number of reasons. One is we've talked at length about the need for Ryan Walters and staff to show they can do this, or to give the fan base enough confidence. There's a lot of hype. I mean, Tom's written about 40,000 40,000 tickets sold. This is I think that exceeds my expectations. You've got a new, you got the Tiller Tunnel coming in. You've got the north or south end zone. There's going to be some hype on this front end. Tom, what does a good September look like for Purdue? I mean, I know wins and losses, you could win them all in theory. That would mean beating Wisconsin, the team you haven't beaten in West Lafayette in 26 years. But talk about what that looks like out of the box for Purdue.
Yeah, it's a big month. 4 out of the 5 games in that month are at home. Talked about the opener against Fresno, and they go to Virginia Tech, and then you got Syracuse at night. You got Wisconsin on a Friday night. Then you've got homecoming against Illinois. So that's the day they're going to dedicate Tiller Tunnel. So you got to make hay in September. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Right.
You want to make a bowl. I think you got to turn the corner from September to October at 3-2 at the very least. You look at the back half of that schedule, guys, and you got to squeeze out 3 more wins. You got Northwestern and Indiana, which helps. Where's that third win going to come from? And those games against Illinois, Nebraska, Minnesota, sort of your peer programs, those are probably going to be the games that decide Purdue's fate. Vegas had, I think, Purdue as a win total at 5.5. Sounds about right if you ask me. To me, 6-6. Hey, man, 6-6 would be a very good record given what we've talked about as far as the personnel, the staff, and the schedule, especially. Would be a heck of a season just to get to a bowl game. 7-5, maybe that's their ceiling. But again, 5-7, I mean, would be very realistic too. So, but again, September, guys, it's going to be probably your make or break month right out of the gate. Maybe that sounds funny to say, but they got to make hay. And again, that opener right against Fresno, very good head coach Jeff Tedford, man, one of the best in the business. You don't want to go to Virginia Tech 0-1. You certainly would like to make a splash in a renovated stadium during a new era of Purdue football with a brand new head coach. So there really is a lot riding on the line come high noon, September 2nd.
Yeah. Well, we know, Mike, some of those back in the day when they used to play those noon kicks in September. I remember Drew Brees' senior year was about 100 degrees when Central Michigan came calling. It's going to be interesting because you have those night games, but you have your first 2 games at noon. Conditioning will be an important part of this as well. But Mike, how do you view that? I mean, is there anything new or different on the importance of that first month and making that impact when you're going to be playing 4 or 5 games at home?
Well, ever since I've been covering this program, it seems like the first game seems to be, especially of a new era, it seems like, okay, they've got to win that first game to kind of catapult themselves into, the month of September or whatever. And this is no different. I mean, Purdue is coming off, winning the Big Ten West, so they have some program momentum there. You have a new coach who's very energetic and, for all the things that Tom said, and there's a lot of momentum around the program with the stadium and everything like that you want to capitalize on that and just get off to a good start. And yes, it's about winning games, but also about playing well too. You want to establish your identity in that first month. if it's going to be a defensive identity that Ryan Walters wants to have, then you've got to do it. Or are they just going to chuck it around and lean on the passing game as much as they can? So, I don't want to. I don't know what record they need to come out of September. I mean, they need to be 3-2 at the worst to really achieve the goals they want to achieve, and that's getting to a bowl game and staying in contention for the Big Ten West. But they've got to play well. They've got to see how this all meshes together. And that's the curiosity of everyone. Just how does this all come together? And again, we've been through this drill before with new coaches in their first game, and we ask the same questions as far as how it's all going to work, and who's going to do what's the style, what's the philosophy, and all this kind of stuff. So it's another first game that carries a lot of weight for a lot of reasons, and I think people are just kind of anxious and eager to see what transpires.
Yeah, Danny Hope, the only one of Purdue's last 4 coaches to win his first game, if I'm right, because Joe Tiller lost his first. Danny Hope beat Toledo. Darrell Hazel had a highly memorable performance at Cincinnati. And, of course, that Jeff Brown, which was a memorable performance against Louisville at Lucas Oil in a very competitive game against Lamar Jackson. But we'll see how this one plays out. We're going to switch the subject to basketball. I'll come back to you, Mike. You wrote a story on Friday on goldenblack.com. Got a chance to talk to Todd Mitchell and Troy Lewis and Jerry Colangelo. All 3 will be, I believe Colangelo will be there in attendance on tonight, Saturday night, for the induction ceremonies, and Gene Keady. Just your sense of, maybe if we start with Colangelo, your chance to talk to him and what a guy like Gene Keady has meant to basketball. We know what Troy and Todd, those guys have had a great deal of deference to him as a father figure, but this is a big deal. He's only the 3rd person in the history of Purdue basketball to get to the Naismith Hall of Fame. And when you're on the list with John Wooden and Charles Stretch Murphy, you're on a pretty good pedestal there. So put that in perspective for us.
Well, the word that kept coming up in all these conversations was, it's overdue. Should have happened earlier. And I think the reasons are pretty clear why it didn't happen earlier, because he never got to the Final Four. He never won a national championship. There were probably always coaches ahead of him that had done that. And that seems to be even though they don't have a criteria, that seems to be the criteria. And these committees change, every couple years or 3 years. So everybody has a different priority that they look at as far as what is Hall of Fame worthy. And, as we all know, and every Purdue fans know, that's the glaring omission from Gene Keady's resume is no Final Four, no national championship. Everything else, was Hall of Fame worthy. Even, the thing that struck me about Gene's career was he had tremendous success in the Big Ten. Big Ten championships, Big Ten Coach of the Year, great players and stuff like that. But that also transcended into the national part too. And so he became a household name and all that stuff. But a lot of people just think it's overdue. Him and Jerry Colangelo, really didn't get to know each other, except probably the last 10 to 15 years. He's going to be a presenter along with Tom Izzo for this thing on Saturday. So, they have a good relationship. Jerry was probably a little surprised that he was asked to be a presenter by Gene, not because of anything bad. It's just that he was a little bit surprised. And as you know, Alan, you got to be in the Hall of Fame to be a presenter, so you have to pick somebody that's already there. But very, very gracious about Gene and what he accomplished at Purdue and all that stuff. And of course, Troy and Todd were, they lived it. They understood. What he's meant to Purdue basketball in the Big Ten. And it's great. The one thing Jerry really hit on was that Gene, a lot of times you get up there in age and Gene's in 87 and you don't have an opportunity to enjoy it, understand what it is. But Gene, Jerry was very happy that Gene got in the Hall of Fame. He's going to be there. He's going to know what he's going to be able to enjoy it. And that was very important for Jerry. And whether that pushed him over the edge, I don't know, but he's in the Hall of Fame. He'll get honored. It'll be a great day for him and Purdue basketball on Saturday in Springfield, Mass. And, to have only three individuals from Purdue basketball in the Hall of Fame over its long and storied history is, that's quite a special place for Gene to be with John Wooden and Stretch Murphy. And no, I didn't see Stretch Murphy play in high school, even though he led Marion to the 1926 state championship, I believe back in the day. But no, it'll be a great day for Gene, and he'll have a lot of people there, a lot of well-wishers, and I just hope he soaks it all up and thoroughly enjoys it.
Yeah, and I think he will, just because that is such a thing. I mean, he's never really been all that focused on awards, but the opportunity to have that happen, is hard to minimize. I mean, he was that way. Tom, you had a chance to, after football last week, to be part of to watch a lot of the festivities of the annual or the alumni deal. And by the way, I've misspoken all along. It is the fourth. Piggy Lambert, obviously, also in the Hall in the Hall of Fame, not the third. I keep forgetting that. I keep omitting Piggy. My apologies to the Lambert family, but he is actually the fourth and the second coach. But Tom, your thought on that whole situation and just seeing that group together it really speaks well for what Matt Painter's been able to put together from an alumni perspective, but also just that atmosphere around Purdue basketball.
First, I mean, you have to be in the Hall of Fame to present somebody.
Yeah,
it just seems like a totally absurd stipulation. But anyway, and it's a Hall of Fame. Rick Mountain and Glenn Robinson aren't in that. I guess it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, isn't it? It's not the College Basketball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that is.
But I digress. Just so cool. I mean, the number of players who were back from the various eras just spoke a lot about that Purdue basketball family we hear so much about. And the love they have for the institution and the program and the coaches. The two coaches they've had since 1980. For 43 years, Purdue's had two head coaches. And it's mind-boggling to think about and the lives that these guys have touched, Keady and Painter in particular. And Keady was the coach when I was in high school. He became coach when I was a sophomore in high school. And I remember going over there that first year. Purdue was coming off the Final Four and watching NIT games. I saw the program. Yeah. Duke came here with a coach named Mike Krzyzewski was in his first.
That's right.
Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought?
And Purdue ended his first season.
He won't amount to anything, will he, Tom?
No, they're requiring.
But two guys, not to get off on a whole nother tangent, but I saw some stories written this week. I'd love real quick your thoughts, if you have a couple of seconds, on your two or three best Keady teams. Was that 87-88 team better than the 93-94 team? I think it probably was. I love that 86-87 team too, that washed out against Florida and Dwayne Shinsis. That team may have been better than the team the next year because it had Doug Lee. But anyway, it'd be it's always a fun debate. Keady has some good teams. And again, those teams are close to my heart because I was actually in college in 87-88, though, for those teams, 86-87. Got to work with a guy named Alan Karpick.
Oh, that's dangerous.
To run the team bus.
Dangerous.
To go to some exhibition games at Belmont with Kip Jones. And
yeah.
I'm getting off on a tangent. But
we had good dinners, though, right? Yeah, it was good.
I got a lot of good memories of that era, and your guys' thoughts on maybe and perspective, maybe the couple best teams Keady ever had.
Well, Mike, I'll let you go at first, and we maybe agree on them. But what are your thoughts of his best teams?
Well, I think just the fact that you had Glenn Robinson on the 94 team, I think, elevates that team to a pretty high ranking. And as we all know, if one of those teams had gotten to the Final Four, that would be labeled Keady's best team.
Yeah.
But you don't. But even the year was it 2000?
2000, yeah.
Got beat by Wisconsin in the Elite Eight. I mean, if they make the Final Four there, if Jerron Cornell does not suffer a high ankle sprain, I think my memory serves me right, then would that be labeled Keady's best team because it went to the Final Four when in reality it probably wasn't Keady's best team. But the 94 team, I think, kind of stands a little bit ahead just because of Big Dog and some of those other Gonzo and some of those other guys on the team. Not to discount Matt Painter in any way, but the mid '80s teams were great. I mean, that was a great recruiting job by Gene at that point to get those three guys together and build around them and make it happen the way they did. And I know they suffered a tough loss up in Detroit in the NCAA tournament. But I like the 94 team for all the pieces that they had, but it is just too bad not one of those teams was able to break through and get to the Final Four.
Yeah, I agree with Mike, though I was not around day by day in 94. It was in Columbus, Ohio, but 88, boy, they were a fun team to watch. But as it turned out, it was maybe the NBA guys, the Mitch Richmond bank shot. Maybe that was always the adage at the time. You had to have an NBA guy. And of course, Danny and the Miracles won it all that year. And yet Purdue could not have had more of a paved trip to the Final Four when you look at it on paper at the Pontiac Silverdome. When you look at Vanderbilt, Kansas, who was, barely got in the tournament. Kansas State, a team of Purdue had beaten by 29 points in the regular season. Lon Kruger's bunch, and yet the heartbreak of that night will never be forgotten by Mark Monteith and others in terms of the book he wrote on that. But yeah, those were fun teams and great people. I certainly love the 88 team in terms of just the personalities. They kind of are the same guys these days. When you talk to Troy, Todd, and Everett, they're still that way, but a lot of fun. And you can't help but be happy for Gene Keady and really for Purdue basketball. I mean, you're right. It's a long time coming, and it's maybe even extra special the fact that he does get into the Hall of Fame without getting to the Final Four. I mean, I think maybe John Chaney did as well, but this is extremely impressive and a lot of respect for what he meant to the world of basketball. Because the other thing that gets brought out and is his devotion to USA basketball. Yes, he coached the Pan Am teams, but he gave his life, his professional life, gave a lot to it when he was coach at Purdue, and even after the fact when he had a chance to work in the NBA and work with Steve Lavin at St. John's. He wanted to still work, no question, but this is a guy that really, if there's ever was a lifetime achievement award, this is it, and I think that Gene Keady deserves it. So I
would also say that this is also, I view it as a Purdue basketball program award as well. And I don't know if you can say that with a lot of other people that get in the Hall of Fame. But there's something about Purdue basketball when they win something, it seems like the program played a big role in pushing it to where it needed to be. Now this, obviously Gene won those games and all that, but I view this also as a Purdue basketball honor as well because of Gene's longevity, what he meant for the program, and the fact that he coached the next coach that is carrying on the legacy as well.
Yeah, hard to minimize that. All right, gentlemen, thank you for your time and expertise. Always enjoyable. It's nice to hear us that we can flap our gums with the best of them. That's a good thing. And we get a chance to do that. We want to stay tuned because we're going to have Brian Neubert, who will be willing to talk about Purdue basketball in Europe. He's going to explain the route of Friday and the route of Thursday, but the Boilermakers have one more game left. That will be, I believe, in Czechoslovakia on Monday. So we'll talk with Brian on that. So guys, have a good rest of the weekend and stay tuned. We'll have our next segment with Brian Neubert. Our second segment of Saturday Simulcast, a reminder to you, and now that Brian's sitting here, it's always a reminder that you can subscribe to goldenblack.com, and we wish that you would by you can, if you're a YouTube subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do have a website that's important to visit on a daily basis, and some say it even can become habit forming. So we would appreciate that as well. That you can always join the Boilermaker Alliance too, if you so desire, and get that as part of your deal too. Brian, Friday's game was not much of an affair, so to speak. I think I joined it in progress. It was 58-6 or whatever it was when I tuned in. And I know that there were some extenuating circumstances with the opponent, but I guess give me your assessment, not just of Friday's game, but just what we've kind of seen and produced 3 victories, two in Germany and 1 in Austria this week.
Yeah, I think they've done everything you'd want them to do, considering they don't have Zach Keady. I think they've looked cohesive. I think they've looked like a good team without the best player in college basketball. You'd probably like for some of these European teams to be a little bit better, but this is what you get in situations like this. You schedule these things so far out in advance. It's a time of year where all these teams are still rejoining one another, so sometimes they're out of shape, sometimes they're out of playing, they're not in optimal
and optical
they're not in optimal standing as a team. Sometimes they don't have all their players, as was the case today with this team Purdue played, whose name I already forgot. I don't want to use team names because I don't want to get them wrong, and I don't want to sound like I'm making fun of our beloved NATO partners overseas. But,
SKN St. Holton, but all right, I'll fall into some.
Call them SKN.
Yeah, there you go. That's better.
Today, apparently, and I'm no expert on these teams, but I'm told SKN has a number of American players who aren't there yet, aren't with their team, and they probably would have made a big difference. Would they have beaten Purdue? No. Would they have played Purdue within 50? Maybe. We just don't know. But that's part of what I've been hammering away at, to everyone's exhaustion, I'm sure, is that you have this really established team, and you're playing in a form other than the form you'll play this season, and saying, okay, we need experience in case Zach Keady gets hurt or he's out of the game. Well, that's a pretty big if. So this is really, sure, there's some positive take from some of this stuff. Getting Miles Coleman some run, getting Camden Heide some run, getting Lance Jones some experience playing with these guys in a kind of competitive environment. That's all positive, but this is sort of warped reality in terms of things are going to be almost unrecognizably different when things resume back at Purdue. But being that this is a team down at its biggest piece, I don't know what more you could ask from these guys in terms of the way they've played, the way they've coalesced together, the way certain guys have occupied different roles on the fly. Trey Kaufman-Renn has been there,
been impressive,
kind of de facto go-to guy, and he's put up numbers every game. He's been really good. You can't ask for much more, I don't think, from Miles Coleman to this point. Camden Heide's been good before, he went down today. Came down hard on the floor, banged up his back. He should be fine, but it's the last thing you want to see in a game where you're up 50 at half. But no, I think I'm not sure you could ask for a whole lot more than what you've gotten from Purdue. You just would have liked to have seen that game today end at halftime.
Yeah. We were streaming and we weren't paying by the hour, but that one was could have been was over. Purdue got off to a 15-love start, and the rest was history. Now Purdue plays on Monday in the Czech Republic against BKBRNO or Borneo. It's not Borneo, but that one will be at 9:30 Eastern time. So we're going to have to get you up that morning on Monday to watch that. For that test, I would assume it'd be 3:30 Czech Republic time for the Boilermakers final game in Europe. It's not funny, but they are going to spend, I think, a little time in Italy. All those countries where they are located are going to be close together, but quite the experience, even just to see Mason Gillis. They obviously went to Dachau, which he talked about on Friday, but also the experience of just it's got to be something for those guys, for a lot of those guys to have a chance to walk around some of these historic and as they keep saying, they go back to 1300. Yeah, that's true. Amazing experience for those guys, and can't hurt from a team camaraderie standpoint, one would think.
Yeah, and that's part of the college experience too. I mean, getting outside the little slice of the world you grew up in, the only thing you've ever known, in a lot of cases, and kind of broadening your horizons. I think it's a good educational opportunity for the guys who want to treat it as such. It's inevitable that not all of them do, because these guys nowadays are so basketball focused that they tend not to process things going on around them. But for those who want to treat it as an educational opportunity, it's right there for them. And even the guys who don't, you can't miss not see, like, the Coliseum when you walk by it, and you still might realize 30 years later, hey, I was there, I saw all this, I saw what's left of all this stuff that happened in World War II and things like that. And it can be an important life experience. And that's something that's kind of getting lost in all this in college sports nowadays too, is we're all talking about transfers and NIL, and, at the end of the day, you still have to become productive adults. And, I think this sort of stuff is pretty valuable, in that regard. I just know I got to go to Australia when I was a kid, and it really, expanded my mind to things beyond, my little piece of North Jersey, where I grew up.
Well, I think there's, and I haven't been, I've not been on the continent. I've been to Ireland, to Iceland, and to London, but to have that experience, and it can't help but again, whether it be Dachau or whether you see the great churches of Munich, or even looking at the Olympic history, 1972 Olympics in Munich and what that meant, and all these kind of things. You're right. These guys are smart people, or people that are actually there, hopefully, for a college education. And this is going to be one of the things they won't forget, one would think, from that standpoint. All right. When you look at, Brian Waddell has been impressive. You talked about, we've written a little bit about him. And again, a little bit hard to take on what these games are, but and I thought Lance Jones also seems to fit, which we expected. He's probably a guy that's going to be fighting for starting minutes, if not starting time, start for this season. But talk about those guys and anybody else that's jumped off at you, just from an eyeball test, from what you've seen so far. And then maybe even including back to last Saturday too.
Well, Brian Waddell's been really good all summer. Every time I've been out there, he's been really good. And I think what he's done in Europe has really kind of validated that. And it's just the question for him is, where do his minutes come from?
Yeah.
Purdue's got some dudes at that position. Miles Colvin is a stud in the making. Camden Heidi's a stud in the making. And it's just a matter of whether you want to invest early in the maybe the higher ceiling talent. Not that Brian Waddell's not a really good athlete. He is, from a physical perspective. He doesn't have the same sort of, presence as those two other guys, but he's a really good basketball player. I think he's past the ACL thing now.
Yeah,
I think
he looks like
much more confident than he's ever been. That's how he looks anyway.
Yeah.
And I think you're starting to see glimpses again of that player that, Purdue was infatuated with when he was coming out of his redshirt year before he hurt his knee. And it's a really good problem to have.
Yeah.
He's been really good, but he's also just been really solid. And at worst, I think he's a guy who puts your younger guys on notice and, is living, breathing testament to the fact that if those guys slip up, they're not going to play. And it's hard to look at a Miles Colvin and saying, okay, this guy might not play but he will play. But what I'm saying is competition makes everybody better. And those guys are going to have to go against each other in practice. They're going to compete with each other for minutes. They might have to engineer some things a little bit to get them all on the floor enough to leverage the assets. You've seen Miles Colvin play some true guard minutes out in Europe, whereas he's typically going to be a small forward, a 3 type guy. Whether that's simply a byproduct of them not having Ethan Morton, I don't know. But, if you can play him there, that's one more avenue that you can get minutes for a guy you need to get minutes for. I think Purdue has every reason to want to invest in him early and get him up to speed, and in hopes of getting the very best out of him when it matters the most. I always go back and say that had Jaden Ivey not missed those games in the non-conference season his freshman year, Purdue wouldn't have had him his sophomore year, because he would have his trajectory as a player would have gotten to a point in March where somebody would have drafted him in the first round. I think somebody would have drafted him anyway. The way the NBA draft is going in terms of pre-drafting guys. But the thing with that is that Ivy didn't get that experience early on to put him at a place late in the season where, he really had a decision to make. I think that's not really a relevant comparison. I'm just saying is when you get on Miles Colvin as many minutes as possible in November, you're going to get the best version of Miles Colvin you're going to get during his freshman season in March. And that's the goal.
Yeah. And then that's
what was your question?
You answered it.
Okay.
I don't even remember it. So I think you completely, it really doesn't matter much what I ask you anyway. You're good at just talking, but no, that was, you answered it. All right. A difficult situation, and it does pertain to Purdue basketball. We don't know what's obviously going to happen, but the tragedy in Maui, you're set to go out there in November. You've been out there. I was there recently on a personal trip, but unbelievable, that devastation. Yeah. And we don't know, who knows 3, 4, what would be 3 months from now, not all that long. From when Purdue goes out there, or supposed to go out there, but just unbelievable. I just wanted you're a stream of consciousness person in terms of what you see there. You've been to that island. It's hard to imagine the suffering that's going on there, but you probably knowing you like to get around a little bit to seeing the banyan tree in Lahaina, and you've been to places like that. It's just hard to imagine that city is basically 80% gone.
Yeah, I've been there twice, and basketball doesn't matter.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's one of the nicest places with some of the nicest, kindest people you'll ever come across.
They are
out there,
absolutely.
And it's just an awful deal. Awful deal. That little town in Lahaina, really cool little area. Lots of artists, lots of restaurants.
Yes.
Lots of really neat trees.
Yeah.
As you mentioned before, that's where I got on a boat to go whale watching on Thanksgiving years ago by myself. And just a lovely, lovely place. And just seeing it on the news being gone, and just thinking about the however many people it is now who've lost their lives to this is just crushing.
Yeah.
At some point in time, somebody will have to make a decision about the Maui Invitational. It's too early to know. It's hard to imagine it being played. It's also, not outside the realm of possibility that, the event and the community rallies around it.
I agree.
And, dedicates all. dedicates it to what's going on in Lahaina. I don't know. I'm only speculating. I hate to speculate.
Yeah, I agree
about this stuff. I mean, there's also options: move it to Honolulu, move it to California, move it to Vegas, give a chunk of the proceeds to rebuild Lahaina, get ESPN involved, get them to help, stuff like that. But it is way too early to know.
No doubt.
But it's a secondary topic because of what's going on out there. Just one of the most peaceful, places I've ever been, and just a really, really tragic deal going on there.
Yeah, I would say in my experience, I've been there a couple of times, and again, only once recently, but you're right. They're just the friendliest people. And if anybody's going to band together, it's probably going to be them. But you have, like I said, and it's so new, it's hard to put in it. And you're right. It's not fair to speculate, but it is something of unbelievable proportion. And yet that tournament, you're right. They could, Purdue and Gonzaga are going to play in the first round of that. There's some economic opportunities that might, and again, too early to speculate, but might present itself moving into that week, which will be the week of Thanksgiving, right? It's when it is scheduled currently, and we'll see what happens on that front. So, all right, Brian, we'll. On that note, a somber one at best, but yet it is what it is, and it's important that I think your statement about the fact that it's just basketball, all this is just basketball. None of trips to Dachau or the what's going on in Maui certainly take a lot of precedent over this. So thanks again so much for your time, and also the Union Club Hotel for their sponsorship of this. A reminder that you can subscribe to us at goldandblack.com. Please do so. Specials going on, and we're looking forward to the start of football season here before long. It's already started, but the games would be nice to get started as well as we go into the 23-24 academic and athletic year. So have a great weekend for everybody else. Brian, thanks again, and we will see you next week on our Saturday Simulcast.